Riots.
Yeah, about a year after still, yeah.
Okay, so how was it growing up? I mean, after everything that's happened previous to that, like how was it growing up for you?
In the 80s, you saw a lot. Like there was a lot of growing up in Peckham.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of racism. Peckham was like a really white area. Like some people might not think.
Really?
Some people might not think that now,
Mm-hmm.
but if you speak to older people, they'll tell you that it was predominantly it was white. I mean, North Peckham was a world. North Peckham was like its own world unto itself. Like North Peckham Estate was a very multicultural estate. Like you had Vietnamese, you had Black Caribbean, Black African, you had some European, a couple Asians in there, but it was a very multicultural like kind of community over on North Peckham and Camden Estate. And this is when you're going back to where they had the bridges that went over the estate. So from Peckham High Road, where you've got Harris Academy now, which used to be Warwick Park School, you'd come over a bridge. You go into the estate there and you go over a bridge that takes you over one road into another big estate and over another bridge into another big estate, and then you get to Burgess Park. So it was very vast and that, but it was a very, very predominantly white area back in the early 80s. Towards the late 80s, going into the 90s, it changed a lot. Because what you had was what some people refer to as white family. Was a lot of the white families were actually moving out, going to Kent, going to Essex, and that's when that kind of started to happen and that. So looking around, like looking out my window, which I used to do quite a bit, you saw quite a bit of things that happening. You know what I mean? It was less CCTV, so there was a lot of crime and stuff like that.
Okay, and did you live in the North Estate and what you was talking about?
I lived on Bells Gardens Estate, which a lot of people refer to as Yellow Brick. I mean, it's always been referred to as Yellow Brick. Yeah. But it's Bells Gardens for those who actually have letters coming there.
Okay.
It's myself, you know what I mean?
So how was like the housing conditions for like, I mean, was it bad? Like other than the crime that went on outside, like, I mean, where you was living, was it first of all, it was a flat?
Yeah, it was a flat,
Okay. Was that, how many bedrooms was that flat?
3 bedrooms.
Okay, and did you go out by yourself? Was you a single child?
To start off with, I was the youngest of 3 boys, and then shortly after, towards the end of that decade, my sister was born. So then there was 6 of us, like my parents and 4 of us as children,
quite a big
living in a 3-bedroom.
Oh, so how was that for you?
It was tough. Tough, not to say there wasn't no love in the household, and I think that was the best thing about that era, was that everybody just got on with it. Like there wasn't much, we shared a lot, and not just amongst my siblings, I'm talking family on a whole, you know, like we shared a lot. Like my grandma lived like four roads over, and like if we was going to my grandma's to like be looked after because my parents are at work or whatnot and have you, like I could have other cousins there and we were sharing. I'm talking about there'd be 10 of us, and we're going for 2 portions of chips. Do you know what I mean? And that's split in between 10. You know what I mean? So back then we had to, the way things were set up.
Like the chips were big portions.
Well, the guy in the chip shop knew my grandma very well. So when we used to come in with our 50p, he knew what time it was, and he'd load up the bag most definitely. And she'd be at home frying a couple eggs. But the way it was is how the type of opportunities for work and employment back then. I'm not saying it was the worst, but you kind of just had to get in where you fit in realistically, and just that kind of just take a job because the bills needed to be paid. So as children, we was raised to kind of make do with what you had. It's those kind of ethics that was instilled in us. And it wasn't just my family, the neighbours were like that, and the people down the street were like that. You can go into anybody's house in that era, and I saw it change in the 90s going into 2000s, but within that era you could actually go into somebody's house and it's more or less running the same way that your house was. There's only a few people, and those are the people your parents told you to stay away from, but majority of people were on the same page. I couldn't walk down the road after school and be somewhere where somebody knows that my parents don't want me to be, and I don't get home and my parents come home and ask me what I was doing there. How they found out, I don't know. They didn't have mobile phones. They had the phones, you had to,
so word of mouth.
All word of mouth, and people will go out of their way to let your parent know or tell your grandparent. Or, do you know what I mean? Like my grandma was always in the same place. So I know I could knock her down and say, listen, Miss Griffiths, I see your grandson down the road there. She was like, thanks for letting me know. She'll be on the phone to my parents in the evening saying, listen, ask him what he was doing down there. So we had to be mindful because people looked out for each other back then. And I think the community spirit in the 80s as a child, specifically growing up, and as a black child, you know, you feel the love, not just from black families.
Yeah.
There were white families within our community. So even
so
though
it
I
was
said
safe
that,
as well. Then you
I
felt
felt
safe as a
safe.
child.
I felt safe, even though there were higher levels of crime. You knew everybody,
Yeah.
if not by name, by face. And as a child, they don't know you directly, or they may not know your parents, but they see you with your parents. And my dad used to work in the local museum, and he used to work for the local authorities. So there's a lot of people that worked for the local authorities that knew my father. And my mum worked in a meat factory, so it was like my parents wouldn't say popular, but they were well known.
Yeah.
That knew my mum grew up in Beckham.
So did you see your parents often?
Yeah.
Okay.
I grew up with my mum and my dad.
Yeah.
Up until about the age of 11.
Okay.
And then they separated at that time. And then
Yeah.
I had to make a choice about where I was going to live.
Yeah.
And I had to make as a big decision
Is
for
that a hard
myself.
choice? Probably a
Very hard choice.
Yeah.
Because you don't, as a child, as an 11-year-old child, that decision's not yours to be made. Like, you know, you want your mum and you want your dad, realistically. And I somehow chose to be with my dad. Dad was strict, you know. Seriously. Like,
Really?
Strict, man.
So did you regret that after?
Nah.
Oh, okay.
I didn't regret it.
Yeah.
I mean, I regret the situation that it had to be like that. But something in my heart just told me, yo, go back and live with your dad. It was my childhood home. All my memories were there. Everything, all my friends. I grew up there, and most importantly, love my mum to death. But my mum is lenient. And I was a young man, and where my mum moved to on North Peckham Estate, there were a lot of elements, what I would say negative influences, even though they were good friends of mine.
Yeah.
Negative influences on an estate that was riddled with crime and drug dealing and drug using, and you know, there was knife crimes and street robberies, and somehow, somewhere, I know I would have fallen into that head first without no equivocations and just been fully immersed in that. So the decision 2 weeks after moving with my mum, the decision to move back to my dad's was solely subconscious. I didn't even think about it.
So when you moved with your dad, did you ever talk to, like, you said you had friends that did all that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
did you ever? Okay.
Yeah, I still talk to them now, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, man. I don't let go of people, man, unless they let go of me, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes we've got to be the example for each other, do you know what I mean? As people, even though my friend might not be the most positive, if I can be positive for him. Because some of them coming out seeing what I'm doing, like the work that I do in the community that I've been doing for like over 16 years now. Like it sounds like a long time, but like when they come out from where they're coming out from, they look at it and they're just like, you know what, I tell you something, man, like, yeah, man, keep it up, keep doing what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. So it helps me to keep going because they can see what we're doing out here, do you know what I mean? And it goes to show me that in their mind they know what's right from wrong. And it's something that even some of them have been able to turn around and help the young people themselves.
So what was your memories of the 80s?
Memories of the 80s. I think the things that stood out about the 80s in terms of memories, I mark everything by the music. Okay. The music of the 80s, the sound of the 80s, whether it was reggae music, pop music, soul music, it just had this everlasting feel to it that you can put on one of those songs today and it will take me back to a day or a place or a time within the 80s that I was either feeling good or feeling bad, like, or even indifferent, because every song meant something. It has this different meaning because it will take you to a place, you will see something, and obviously the landscape of the area that I grew up in has changed. It's different, but I can see when I hear certain songs, I can see how it used to be, if that makes sense. Yeah,
and as a kid, like, that's interesting you say, like, the music. What kind of artists did you listen to? Or did you enjoy?
Pop music was it? Well, pop music's popular music. So the popular music at the time that was hitting the charts was more or less anything. Reggae music was big. Lovers Rock was a big deal in the 80s. So it was like that was blaring through the households. So you had,
you grew up on that.
Artists like Louisa Marks and what's this lady's name, Kofi, and you had people like Dennis Brown and Gregory Isaacs, and you know, Bob Marley. He died just before I was born. So the music was, you know, it was immortalized within the 80s, that, you know, it was just like everyone was just on it, and the Legend album was being remastered and whatnot, what have you. So I'm just listening to like all of these songs, and on top of that you had the Kylie Minogues and the Jason Donovans and the Madonnas and all of that we loved it too, because it was the music of our time, and it was the songs, like I said, would just mark a memory for you, you know. Like I my first primary school, Peckham Park Primary, that was a Kylie and Jason era. Like they was like running running it. There was Neighbours, so it was like a big thing. There was like the celebrity couple of the time, so it was like everyone was Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan. So that was a big thing back then. That's something I can remember. Other memories of the 80s is the fashion.
Yeah. What do you mean about like the fashion? Was it
clothes, the colours, the kind of cuts and the hairstyles, like the hairstyles.
How was the hairstyles?
You either had like no fade, just a short back and side, high top,
okay.
Or you had this thing called a mullet.
And what's that?
Rock stars used to pump that one hard, but you got the rock star mullet, which is kind of like Pat Sharp. You know what I mean? Or then you had the Euro mullet, which could be curly on the top and just like curl out at the back like a ravishing Rick Rude from wrestling. Like word to the 80s.
Yeah.
But it's different things about the era that just stood out. It was very distinctive, very individual, very unique.
And did you have like one of those hairstyles, or?
I thought maybe 9 times out of 10 I went for something called the Yul Brynner. I didn't call it that, but he was an actor and he had a bald head, so my dad referred to, when we went to the barber shop, big up George's Barbers on Queen's Road, Fair Deal, they were called, we used to go there all the time, and my dad would just take us in there, 3 of us sit us down and just be like, Yul Brynner. And he'll leave and come back, and then it's just a one level with a line down the side. So I look kind of cool. I got some pictures, from my sister's christening back in 1989, where I had my Yul Brynner and my line in there. And then on top of that, there was the sporting moments of the 80s as well, because I was very big into my sports. I discovered football partially in 86, like the World Cup. Was very big. We had the big incident with England against Argentina, where I saw this guy Maradona, just like football. Like you just don't. At the time, I was maybe 4 years old, and you know this game involves you kicking a ball and running up and down. When I saw that man do what he did that day, when he ran through the team and scored that goal, I thought to myself, you know what, that is magic. Do you know what I mean? And then after that, he just scored a goal with his hand and got away with it, and I was just like, this guy's crazy. I like it. So, you know what I mean? I locked into football after that, and then when I started paying attention to like local football, I think John Barnes was playing for Watford at the time before he went to Liverpool, and I just like John Barnes. Being a young black youth, you know what I mean? You look out there for things that kind of resonate with you. Yeah. And I saw John Barnes, and I was like, he was a classy footballer. So I didn't support Liverpool, I supported John Barnes. But like, it was like, I used to see some of the abuse that he got, and it saddened me a bit.
Be that one whilst he was playing?
Yeah, whilst he was playing football, man. Chicken skins, cold, banana skins and cold chicken and all sorts like that. And his own fans would be hurling abuse at him. But that was the 80s, like football, fights on the terraces, like there was hooliganism, it was a part of the football culture. The football was a working man's game at the time. Do you know what I mean? But then through Liverpool, I discovered Arsenal. Through watching Liverpool. And then that was like the biggest sporting moment for me in the 80s was 1989. When Arsenal won the league up at Anfield, had to win by 2 goals. It was a big deal. It was a real big deal. And that from then, solid honorary Arsenal fan, because the team itself resonated with me. So that's like sporting things of the 80s. And you had
that's amazing.
The 88 Olympics as well. There was a guy called Ben Johnson that he was disqualified for using steroids. He ran like a really good race, but then straight after the race they took his gold medal. You know what I mean, for using drugs and stuff. So it was all over the news. So when you talk to me about the 80s, things just pop up and keep flashing into my head. Sorry to cut you.
It's alright. No, I was just saying it was amazing that obviously at that age that you got to experience that and then like grow to love a team and watch them grow as well. I've stuck with them ever since. They hurt my heart a lot, but I stuck with them. And it shows you. It just kind of, it takes me back to them. That was my childhood. It was what we called the come up. That was my come up. I was young and impressionable, and it was easy to just lay things on to me. So my relationship with football started in the 80s. My relationship with music started in the 80s. I went on to be a recording artist myself, just from the vibe that I got from the music in the 80s. So did you start off doing that in the 80s? So when you were young, did you start doing it then, music?
No, I just appreciated music.
Okay.
I guess I was being a sponge back then, and I just soaked it all up.
Yeah.
But it was like rap music was coming to the fore. It wasn't mainstream.
Yeah.
It wasn't mainstream at all. But it was slowly but surely starting to become a part of popular culture.
Yeah.
And rap music was something that we all resonated with as young black boys, or even just young kids in an urban environment.
Yeah.
When we're looking at the music videos, we're seeing the same kind of housing estates as the backdrop, and we're like, wow, we just related to it. And when they're talking about some of the hardships that they had, we're like, wow, same as us. Like, you know, coming home and you might have dumpling and butter for dinner, and it was as real as that, or a jam sandwich, and that was it. Just make do, you know. Sometimes, so you know, going back through all those times, you look and say it's kind of where we was made. We was kind of designed and put together. Our psyche, our mentality, the way we approach situations in life was from those experiences, and just having that experience with hip hop music coming in the later side of the 80s, going into the 90s, and I think that's what carried me to want to make music myself and want to write songs, and because the songs that I heard in the 80s made me feel, and they still do. If you listen to Magic Radio play a lot of the 80s songs, and it's like love songs.
Yeah, I've listened.
Love songs. They were just immense, man. Like, seriously. So that's where my love for music came from, the 80s.
So you writing now, does that like you said that obviously the 80s influenced you to like go on your musical journey? Do you how do you write? Do you write with your memories in the 80s, or do you write things that like happen now?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to write about things that I've felt, I've seen, I've experienced. If something's happening now that I feel passionately about, I will write about it. But a lot of my earlier material was based on, like, you know, how we was raised, how we grew up, and just comparing it to the current time that we was in. But my main kind of what pushed me over the line with music and made me want to actually say I'm going to pick up a microphone and do it was like the sound system culture that they had back in the 80s that was really starting to pick up in England with sounds like Coxsone and Saxon, and then there was I think it was a sound called Fat Man's from over North London. There was just loads of little tapes that used to just find their way into my house. For my parents, they weren't for us, but when they're not around, what's this? You push the Casio into the wireless, and you play it, and next thing you know, you're hearing live MCs over a beat talking about what you're wearing now. And that blew my mind. Do you know what I mean? Like someone could just take a mic and talk about your earrings and the rips in your jeans, and say, wow, he didn't write that yesterday. He's thinking of that now. And that blew my head over. That wow. And then Smiley Culture, rest in peace. They were innovative in bringing our culture further into like British culture and merging it. Because he had this style where he'd spit the Jamaican slang, but he also spit in Cockney as well. So this was the two sides of our identity. We were British born of West Indian heritage, and here comes this guy, part Jamaican flow, part Cockney flow. He's got this song called the Cockney Translation, and that was like, I saw that on Top of the Pops. I was like, I can do this, innit? Because at first you just thought only Jamaicans could do it. But here comes this English guy doing a bit and a piece of it, reflecting his heritage through his music. And that's what made me say, you know what, I'm going to do it. So we used to mess around a lot, and we used to listen to tapes, and we used to make up little rhymes and lyrics about each other. So we went from like cussing each other in the playground to like actually making songs about each other and that. And then I was actually good at that. Like, you know, my school uniform in those days, ankle swingers and all that. Like, so everyone was taking and picking fun at me, so I had to be good to even win over the crowd, because the minute someone mentions my trousers, that's it. So I had to be very good to make sure that, you know, I could outdo everybody, because they had jokes for days when it came to me. So I had to be very creative, and that came from watching sound systems, and not just the British sound systems from Jamaica, and artists like Supercat and Ninja Man, who I kind of modelled a lot of my delivery and my style on in the early days of how I actually wanted to be received by people. You can trace it back to that era in my life. That was where everything was kind of set in stone. Like, this is the path if you're going to take it.
Should I ask him about TV and movies in the 80s?
How was TV and movies in the 80s? So what did you watch?
We watched 4 channels. There was 4 channels. Four.
Okay. So
back then, the BBC 1, 2, ITV, and Channel 4, so there wasn't much on.
So
and,
was that like your typical Freeview, like they will call it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, call it 4View. There was only 4 channels, and that Channel 4 was that was only like a recent thing, but Channel 4 showed more like cultural programs on BBC, and then BBC One, and so they had programs you'd just watch more or less anything.
So did you really watch TV though?
I did because it's like cartoons in the morning, over your cereal, a little bit of Batfink or some Mask or some Thundercats, which was big, Transformers, which was big, or you like the He-Man, and we had all the characters, and like you go to the shop and buy the little toys and all of that, and so like, all of the cartoons were like, they were the best thing ever. Like what was my cartoon? I mentioned Batfink, but then you had another one, Mighty Mouse, and you had things like the Chuckle Brothers and that we used to watch, and that because it was just like anything that came on. Pat Sharp, they used to do this thing called was it Fun Factory? Funhouse. Thank you, Chris. It was Funhouse, and that was something I used to look forward to on a Friday, to come home and watch Funhouse after school, and then my mum will come back from work, and then we'll go up to Quick Save to get some no frills. Just the worst shit, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. So in that time, things like I used to watch a lot of programs with my dad and my granddad as well. So watching the West Indies play England, and
so they came on TV, or
those things came on television. My granddad had those taped. He recorded those like in the 80s. There's some big moments for West Indian cricket. So in my family, we're big cricket supporters. So when those things were happening, it was an event. Yeah. When the Test cricket came on, it was an event. Everyone comes round, they watch the cricket, and you've got all these old West Indian men in one room like talking and criticising the bowling or the batting or the umpire, and it was just like those, when I think about that, the memories, and then like mum's in the kitchen cooking something, and then like this is what's happening, and it was like I always say like about the 80s, it just felt like this family spirit, even with your neighbour. With your neighbour, and it was just like, doesn't matter black, white, it didn't matter. On my estate,
it was just
it was that I could come home from school, my mum's not home, and if I was hungry or I needed a drink, I could knock a neighbour and say please, and they'll let me in, or the neighbours knew that my mum wasn't home from school just yet, or they'll knock the door, is there anything you need? Like, not that we did need anything, because we was told not to open the door to people, but it was just the fact that people would take the time to check, and it wasn't like nowadays. It's like we lost the trust with each other, for good reason, because the world's it's a different place. It's a different place, but then it's like everybody just was looking out for everybody, and it just felt like that for me as a child. That's how it resonated with me. It could have been something else. Could have been other things happening around me that I didn't see, but at the time it just felt like everyone was just looking out for everybody, and that's what I liked about the 80s, to be fair and honest. Yeah. Another big program I used to watch was Never the Twain, but most probably won't know that.
No,
Never the Twain?
That program?
It's a program.
Oh, no, I've not heard of that.
And Only Fools and Horses.
Oh, I know Only Fools and Horses. My mum watches that.
Yeah. So those were the programs. And people say to me, like, because of my nature and my personality, is, well, you don't watch those programs, do you? I'm like, yeah, I do. Of course I do. Like, because that's like I said, that's what made that era made us who we were. Like, I'm talking about my peers now. Like, we all watch things like that. We all listen. Like Rick Astley, come on, man. Like, that song was one of the biggest songs. Like, even till now, Never Gonna Give You Up. The music of the 80s is timeless. I don't think there's an era, and maybe people that are older than me can correct me, but I don't think there was an era of music. From January the 1st, 1980 to December the 31st, 1989, I don't think there was an era that musically, and I'm talking right across the board of genres, like everything that was coming out was timeless. It just felt like it meant something, because we're coming off the back of the 70s where you had this kind of like this social awakening, and then we've gone into the 80s, and then towards the end of that decade, the house music came in, so then it was party music and drugs and peace and love, and everyone's in the dance. So you can see it was just a wave of things from the 80s, like I said, from the start right to the end, where it's just like, and by the time the 90s came in, the world was a different place. Like, it was like, well, the 80s was over. By the time the 90s came in, there was recessions and do you know what I mean? Like high tops with the fade now, you know what I mean? It was Kid and Play doing the dance, but that was all off the back of and inspired by the 80s. The 80s, it was a good times, man.
Good times. Any questions you think I said?
Other than that, what was you did just for recreation outside of home?
Outside of home, playing with friends, like on the estate, things like Knock Down Ginger, which used to get us in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, we used to play that.
Used to get us in a lot of trouble, but it was fun. I tell you, it was fun. Like I hate to sound like a fogey, but when I see the youngsters nowadays, I'm like, what do you do for fun? And it just, we used to play. And that was what we used to do for recreation. I was a part of a football team. My parents tried to get me into gymnastics, but I ain't like it. I'll play football for hours. You know what I mean? And that was just it. If it wasn't that, you was somewhere doing some work. Libraries we used to go to a lot as well, because you wouldn't necessarily just be allowed out the house. Like I had to wait for my dad to come home.
So what do you mean when you mean libraries? You did educational work in the libraries, or
just go and hold a book. Just go and hold some books and read, and just sit down and with your friends in the library, and everyone picks up a book or the comics, and sometimes you're mucking around, but you've gone there to get books. You know what I mean? We used to read books. We had to. We couldn't be idling, and that's like I'm saying. It's not just like, oh, that was just in my household. It was kind of like right across the board. Everyone's parents were like that. Oh, you're going to the library. Oh, you're go and get some books. And everybody had to kind of read. Like I said, there was only a few people whose parents weren't like that. And those 9 times out of 10 were the people that your parents would tell you, I'm not too keen on you hanging around with those lot. And there was areas such as North Peckham back in the 80s where my mum would tell me, don't go over there. Because in the 80s you had crack cocaine was becoming more prominent as a drug that was sold on the streets, and a lot of the youngsters of the day were starting to dabble, didn't really have much education behind what it was and what the effects were and what it would do to you. And you had people just rubbing their next door neighbour, rubbing their mother, their brother, just for this drug. And it was like, even then, to me, drugs was drugs. And when you're talking about the question you asked me earlier about what was the housing like, when I closed my door, my house was alright. It wasn't a palace, it wasn't the Ritz, but it was clean, and it was everything in there came through honesty, and it felt good. Outside of the door was the block. No intercom, all open. Weed smokers in the day, crack smokers at the night, heroin users 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. I had a memory of mine going to school, having to step over a heroin user who possibly could have been overdosing, but I had to go to school, and I had to leave and step over this man to get to school. I was frightened. And they used to feces on the stairs, and urine and excrement, and that just from the drug use that we wasn't aware of what it was or why someone would do that. We was that young, and there was rooms in the block that I lived in that were like for the lift operations. So the lift operator would be able to come and open it and do the lift maintenance in that room. Somehow they'd get into those rooms. And one day we was just playing Knock Down Ginger in the block, and we was on the top floor of my block, Neville Close, and we opened one of these doors, and it was like foil, needles, but and it's like, and that day I looked at that and said, I'll never in my life use any of these things, never in my life, like the needles and the pipes, and it was just like, oh my god, it was that deep. We went to the phone box and called the police. There was about 5 of us, and we was just like, what do we do with this, man? Like, we just like, with them needles, we'll go and call the police. We had needles dropping from the top floor onto my landing, onto my balcony, where we kept like some of our veg in the winter to keep it cool. And my dad had his flower pots out there, and there's needles dropping from the top. Do you know what I mean? So like, in terms of like inside the home, behind the door, it was a very loving environment, very progressive environment. But outside, you can see all of the pitfalls and all the negative stuff that your parents wanted to try and keep you away from. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's why you have to be in at a certain time. You couldn't go too far from your block, even though it was a thing where we felt safe. I mean, I could walk from here to Timbuktu and back and not feel away, because along the way, someone would always show you a kind face. Like John the greengrocer would always toss me an apple in the morning. I know it sounds like something out of a movie, but he just used to do it. Albeit like part of it would be bruised. He just gave me the one he's gonna throw away, but he still gave it to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want an apple? Go to school. Do you know what I mean? Toss me the apple, and I'd eat the majority of it till I get to the part that's sour and say, John. Do you know what I mean? But it was that when those shops kind of went, there's a lot of independent business people, and when they kind of moved out, the vibes kind of changed as well, because you can go into one of those that you don't have no money. Your mum says, listen, John, I get paid on Friday. John knows mum gets paid on Friday. So if mum comes in for fruit and veg on a Wednesday, John knows getting out on Friday.
Yeah.
And it's not an issue because we're not hiding, and he knows we're good honest people, and he's a good honest person himself. Do you know what I mean? So those were the things about the 80s when you talked about my memories. It was just that how people just used to look out for each other, and it wasn't about, you know, I'm trying to make off of your back, and I'm trying to get, you know, further in life, so I'm going to step on your back and your head and your neck to get where I want to go with something. You know what I mean? If somebody saw someone who was in need, chances are turn around and help and show some kind of help and assistance. You know what I mean? And that was what the beautiful thing was about it. And I don't know whether that was just the collective mindset of people then. I don't know if there's something in the water, I don't know, I can't testify to it. Maybe someone who came through the 60s and 70s can tell me what the layup was for the 80s, but I came in 82, so like I said, by 85, 86, my memory is starting to form. I can go back to remember like times in nursery, watching things like Button Moon and getting excited, you know what I mean? Like just before I went to nursery, and that was for me like some of my best memories was those days in my first primary school, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When did you start going to youth clubs?
Start going to youth clubs in the 90s. There was this project called the Southwark Youth Project that was based at Waverley Upper School. That started in 1992, and that was partly run by the Metropolitan Police and the local authority. It was a collective effort, and that's when I kind of got introduced to youth services and youth workers and stuff like that. So it was just like every summer. And later on, like maybe like 96, 97, started going to like youth club in my area, down the road. It's just somewhere you could just go, and everyone went. It was winter days, you don't want to be at home, your parents allow you out for a couple hours, so everyone says we're going to the youth club, and everyone just hang out there, play table tennis, play pool, this little stereo in the corner, a few girls, because come on, you got to sprinkle a few females into the mix, you know what I mean? There's got to be some reason for us to be there, do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, those times it was the youth clubs that were most popular, and I'm sure anyone who's worked or been around youth clubs can tell you that, you know, the more popular youth clubs were the ones that, you know, that the females used to attend. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Excellent.
I'll be honest.